All right, how's it going, everybody? We're back after a 2-week hiatus, I think, as I went to Rick Roll's conference in Florida. I filmed a lot of interviews there. I think I counted more than 40 interviews in total. They've, by the time you're watching this, they've all been maybe not all, but some of them have definitely been published. So go and watch them if you want, or don't. If you don't, won't blame you. But the only reason people watch this show, that being Luke, of course, is now back. So we'll be doing the junior market overview here in a minute. There's a couple of interesting things. As well as an interview with Jordan from Ramp Metals. Again, it turns out Luke was right again. Who'd expect that? On the financing side of things, he said that he thought a big name would come in, and a big name has cometh. With that being Eric Sprott, he's coming in with a potentially a hefty chunk of money. We don't know yet. We'll ask them though. So that's also part of what we'll be covering today. But of course, I'm also here to listen to my own voice. So I'll start off with a broad picture commodity overview, if you will, and specifically the 3 worst performing commodities this week, which all did very, very poorly. With natural gas on top of the losers, so losing 11%. It's now down to $2.07, which is about as much as my vacation budget this year. Tin lost 10% as the second worst performing asset, which is what my wife tells me I am. And then Dr. Copper, or Dr. Ginger, as I like calling it, was the third worst performer this week, losing close to 8% of its, I was about to say 8% of its value this week, but clearly that's not true. Price is not value, and now I can pretend I'm smart for knowing that. But luckily, coffee prices are also down 6% this week, though, because, with this kind of performance in the metals and energy space, all of us degenerates are going to have to burn the candle at all 4 ends to make ends meet. So there's a positive with coffee being cheaper now, allegedly. And that's about the only positive I can bring up here today, because the best performing of the commodities that I actually tracked last week was oil. Crude oil had a magnificent run, unseen ever before in history, of 0.5%. And again, that's the best performer last week of the commodity. So not great. Well, that's actually not completely true, because if you pull up a germanium chart, which nobody ever does, you may argue that there was an over 6% spike in rare earths prices this week, but that market is extremely immature, quite like me, according to some people in my household. But is this really the price of germanium? We don't quite know yet. Is it fair to look at it on a chart? We don't quite know yet. And I don't really understand. I don't really follow this market. And same goes for indium and tellurium. By the way, they both closed in the green this week. Apparently, with germanium and other rare earths, apparently that's happening because really in China, something. But basically, some of the state-owned miners in China last week reported some numbers, and trust them if you dare. But they said that they're losing money, and one of them expects a net loss of up to $43 million US, whereas they made a profit of over $100 million US last year. So a bunch of things hurting them, but apparently rare earths prices are now seen as trading below production cost, because, that's what the Chinese state owner miner said last week, and it's not looking good. And so, in commodities, bad news or good news. And so the rare earths market is incredibly obscure again, and it seems complicated, but so do most things if you're me. And but so what's apparently happening is that China is moving forward with some type of a strategy that wants to consolidate and control the entire domestic rare earths market, from mining to processing, and so kind of the whole production line. They want to put it under one central government controlled roof. And guess what it's called, by the way? It's called the China Rare Earth Group, creatively enough. And this was established almost 3 years ago now. They've just kind of kept growing it over time. It was established at the end of 2021 by the merger of 3 companies, which, by the way, they were all 3 state-owned before that. But so in this, I found this, what I'm regurgitating here is a news article that I found on asia.nikkei.com. And but so they talk about other rare earth element producers that are that are struggling as well, and are either seeing profits drop dramatically or disappear completely. But again, take everything that you hear on here, everything really that you hear about rare earths, you have to take it with the biggest grain of salt that you can find, because first of all, it's all coming from China typically, and it is regurgitated by a third-tier YouTube channel at best. But we're also seeing larger moves in the rare earth space elsewhere. So in the West, like where Microsoft, for example, last week announced that it's buying into a Canadian rare earths recycling company by the name of cyclic materials. So will this be the future of rare earths in the West, recycling more than mining? Well, that remains, of course, to be seen. But these guys seem to have been at it for a while now, over a decade, it says on here. And as far as I know, it's not yet commercially viable in any respectable quantities. So maybe, but too early for me to speculate on with words and or with money, really. And so yeah, that's it for the price movers. I have a few more headlines though that I quickly wanted to run through that are related to this, and it's going to make sense here in a minute. But S&P Global says that the U.S. is coming in second, right after Zambia, for the slowest mine developer in the world. So that's not great news. But again, bad news is kind of good news in this case. Because so for the US, it takes on average 29 years to bring a discovery to production. And that's without counting the often at least 5 years discovery process itself. With some juniors, of course, at least 15 years discovery process, which mostly makes me think that they're trying to make a discovery in a special rare earth mineral called lifestyleum. But and so why I'm bringing this up is because while China is doing everything it can to secure supply chains, even though they're doing it in a centralized manner, which I do not agree with, they're doing it. I mean, they're doing something, right? Well, the U.S. isn't. They've actually actively been working against it with longer permitting times and a bazillion other issues, including fishes and birds. While on the other end, there's government arms that have been created supposedly to find good projects and give them free monies, grants, to be politically correct. But in reality, their job is to give away a bunch of money basically to companies, and they do not get measured on, or their performance then does not get measured based on how many mines they finance successfully. It gets measured in how much money they give away. And so on one end, they're giving away money mostly, well, often, not mostly, but I shouldn't say mostly, but oftentimes on bad projects, because there are a lot of bad projects out there that are ran by incompetent teams, and sometimes they end up getting government money. And on the other end, so while that money is just, the only thing they have to make sure is that that money leaves the door and it ends up with someone who identifies as a potential miner. On the other end, they're growing red tape, they're hurting production, if you will, or education of skilled labor, and they're creating currency out of the wazoo, if you will, which creates inflation, of course, which makes capexes and opexes go up. And well, S&P Global shows the numbers that's all of this has resulted in. So it's 29 years from discovery to production. So if a deposit was discovered when I was born, it would not yet be in production today. And that's for the average project, okay, which the marginal ones are obviously taking way longer than that, which is completely unacceptable. So that's the state of U.S. mining in a simple number and in a simple chart, if you will. But I suppose I shouldn't get fired up because, as I mentioned, bad news is good news. That's actually bullish for other jurisdictions that I'm in, like West Africa, although not without risk, of course, where, give you an example, Ghana, for example, is on this chart as well. It takes 10 years in some cases to bring a mine into production, 10 years from discovery to production. And then on the other end of the world, you're seeing places like Guyana, for example, in South America, where G2 last week announced a $42 million private placement. And it's apparently by one European investor buying 20 million shares at $1.45. So that's a whole lot of money. And AngloGold Ashanti is also pumping in nearly a dozen, so $12 million, almost $12 million into this. And we don't exactly know who that European investor might be, but I have a feeling he's sitting on the other end of this Zoom call, but I cannot confirm nor deny it. Point being, money is going into other jurisdictions, and specifically ones often thought to be too risky before my time, basically. And so my inexperienced gut says that we see a whole lot more of that in the future. There's, of course, BHP and Lundin Mining wanting to jointly bid for Philo, allegedly, Philo. But again, allegedly. But not only allegedly, I mean, take, for example, Marimaca Copper, or however you pronounce it, Marimaca. I can try it in Spanish. I don't know if that sounds nice or not. But Marimaca Copper financing last week as well, right? It's in Chile. It's receiving a $68 million investment from a strategic partner by the name of Asore IH, that is. That's a South African group. We have Zijin Mining launching a $117 million equity raise for the Kone project with a strategic investment by by ZG Mining. What did I say? What am I even talking about? By the Lundins and ZG Mining for their project again in for the Kone project in Cote d'Ivoire. Um, what else is on here? SolGold. SolGold, not quite the same situation, but they secured a $750 million investment from Franco-Nevada and Osisko Royalties last week for their project in Ecuador. Again, not your typical jurisdiction, of course, in exchange for the gold that is expected or supposedly is going to come out of there. And that was just last week. Okay, that's a lot of money for our space for 1 week flowing into alternative jurisdictions, which is not Canada, US, or Australia. And that S&P article makes total sense when you read it like that. I mean, it makes sense that money would flow that way given the situation in those quote unquote Western countries. And that's not to say that money isn't going into Canada. I mean, there are things happening there as well. I think Tectonic Metals got a decent investment. We'll talk to Ramp. Eric Sprott's putting money into Canada. There's still a decent chunk of money going into Canada, of course, way more than in the US, apparently. There's also some money going into the US and into Australia as well. And those jurisdictions I'm talking about are far from perfect. Okay. And there are and can be major issues there too. But with the ever increasing permitting timelines and kind of BS paperwork in the, again, quote unquote, West, there will be other jurisdictions opening their doors for that capital that's looking for a home, basically. So again, this increasing discovery to production timeline in the US is bullish other jurisdictions. And it's, of course, bullish, long-term bullish for the metals. We'll select metals, pretty much everything except lithium. Kidding, of course, but only half kidding. But yeah, copper is a good example with the copper M&A space brewing with excitement all through last week because of the rumors and the deals that I just walked you through. There's a bunch of stuff happening in Northern Europe with gold. So there's bullish gold in my opinion as well. So that's looking good. And now I'm moving towards shutting up here, Luke, because and it's going to be related to this, what I'm going to say here, but I had 8 no-shows this week. So I had 10 company interviews scheduled. Only 2 of them showed up, with only 2 of the ones who didn't show up. So 2 of the 8 letting me know that they're not going to be on the interview a couple of minutes before the interview. The other 6 of the ones that didn't show up have not gone back to me yet. So like at all, right? And they haven't told me when they want to reschedule for, or if they want to reschedule or not. And I suppose it's hard to send emails from a beach somewhere. But is everyone on vacation? I mean, is that it? And why I'm asking this is because I'm thinking with everything that's kind of brewing in the M&A space and with all this money that I just went through, can we see the junior space starting to move because of that money, or is this too much of a summer doldrum that we're in right now? What do you make of this whole thing?
Yeah, well, Brian Dalton said it's mating season in the show of Brian Lenny Field Notes, and so there's potentially a lot of M&A coming. I'm not sure if M&A will necessarily solve the industry's problem. I mean, GDX is doing quite well. TSXV is doing quite well. Doesn't always feel that way, but quite impressed with how strong the markets still are. Normally, summer is almost always bad. I sold quite a bit of stock in May, expecting a couple of weak months. But if you just look at the GDX, it's not. It's doing quite well, to be honest. So maybe this is the year when everything turned, but it's just slowly building. And there's certainly a lot of deals going on, like the ones you mentioned with Montage and Zhejiang. Very interesting. So yeah, and the biggest mover this week is G Mining Ventures, which is not true. They are on all the top lists, being up a couple of 100%. And but it's not true because they did a rollback, not a real rollback, but it was part of the acquisition of Reunion, and that's why they show up as number 1. And they just acquired Reunion, a company of close to $1 billion now, because of a big discovery. And hopefully Ramp, the company that we will interview today, will also be $1 billion stock at some day, but let's not dream too much. So yeah, I think there's a lot going on, and hopefully it's true that it's mating season and we will see lots and lots of deals before Beaver Creek, which is the conference that in September, when the market hopefully returns or continues to do well.
How's that been in your experience so far? I mean, I know you're a little bit of a vacation enjoyer yourself every now and again. So do you typically just close the laptop for the summer and disappear because there's nothing happening, or is that not really a thing?
No, no, I'm typically always looking at the market and working and well, working. I mean, if you enjoy something, it doesn't even feel like working. But no, I'm not that person. But I am a little bit more. I have long-term positions, and those I'm not touching anyways. The ones that are more, I wouldn't call them trades because I'm not really a trader, but I do have some shorter-term positions because I think something like Montage, for example, when Lundin's increased their financing or their position in the company and they moved a new management team in March, I felt this was a very, very low risk bet, at least for a number of months, because now they will go into construction with the Lundins behind it, and they just closed the deal with, or announced the deal with Sejin. So that was a very easy 150% move. And to be honest, I sold that stock 2 weeks ago. Not because I don't think it will not continue, but it was a short-term trade, and I closed that trade just to yeah, lock in a profit. So no, I'm not taking a couple of months off, and even on a holiday, my wife is not always happy when I just continue my stuff. So even though I go on holidays every now and then, I'm not often really away from the markets.
Good. What else is new? What else is happening there? I suppose we could talk about again what's happening in there seems to be some money going into Northern Europe as well. Specifically, would you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Orion and Rupert both are doing a financing. Orion announced that they have discussions with Rupert right now about a potential transaction. I mean, we talked about it before, I think, where Rupert was acquiring or is acquiring, I'm not completely sure about it, the 70% that B2 Gold owns in the joint venture with Orion. It didn't completely make sense to me that they would only take over the 70% because there's not really a point. They would still not have the rights to increase their open pit onto that ground. So they would still have to do something with Orion. And that's something that became public now, and they are both financing. Interestingly, yeah, they both did the financing almost at the same time. And on the day that Rupert announced this financing, this bought deal, Lundin Gold's CFO left. I was thinking last week, like Lundin Gold, they apparently tried to buy Reunion. That's what Mining Catalyst showed on Twitter as well. There was a document in which Reunion talked about Party B. Apparently, there was a second bidder for Reunion, but G Mining in the end took it over. And if that's true, Lundin Gold is a very profitable gold miner with one project, and companies with one project are extremely risky, as you can see with Victoria Gold recently. One thing goes wrong and a complete company is gone. That risk I don't think is as high with Lundin Gold, but still, if you're a one project producer, something goes wrong, your costs continue and your income ends. And even big companies like B2 Gold or Kinross or Agnico, those companies go down billions of dollars when one of those mines shut down because of a mill fire or some other reason that you can see in this picture that we can show. So Lundin Gold's CFO departed on exactly the same day Rupert announced a financing. And I think Rupert is one of the shortlist companies. I wanted to make a list. I didn't do that so far. I will post it next week on Twitter. A short list of companies that I find comparable to Reunion, companies with a really, really impressive discovery. And those companies get taken over, like Great Bear got taken over, Reunion gets taken over, and Rupert at some point will be taken over as well. I'm almost certain about that, and I think that's not a big bet to make. You just don't know when and how and how it will happen. But it was kind of interesting that the CFO of Lundin Gold left on that same day the bought deal got announced. Rupert would be number one and number two in my mind on Lundin Gold's list. So maybe Lundin Gold is planning to do something that they did with Montage, bringing in people to get a very good discovery, to move it forward, which is complete speculation. And that's what we try to do as junior mining investors, speculate on what could happen. And since Rupert will be taken over in my mind at some point, and Agnico is the biggest candidate, who could compete with Agnico? Well, maybe a company like Lundin Gold. So it's a bit of a stretch, but not impossible. And if that's true, we might find out that the Lundins are also investing in that deal, but it's again complete speculation.
Well, again, talking about money moving around, I wish we could talk longer here and rant on, especially to listen more to my own voice, as I mentioned at the beginning. But we have Jordan waiting to come into the room together with Gareth, by the way. He's not alone. So let him come in. But maybe just to that point, one more thing. Maybe we should get someone on to talk about more broadly about M&A, because this is going to be my very first kind of large M&A cycle that I hopefully am going to witness firsthand. So I don't have too much to add. But yeah, let's let Jordan and Garrett into the room. All right, Jordan and Garrett. First of all, congratulations on getting Eric Sprott into this. That's actually how I thought of starting this. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I should start it with a question asking, like, how did that even happen? Like, who did you have to who did you have to hurt to get Eric to give you money? Like, how did that even happen?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we're so pleased to have Eric now as a long-term shareholder. But how it came about is really through the Earth Labs team. I'm good friends with Denis Levilette, and I started my, I guess, exploration career with them when they went public. I think it was in 2019. So Denis has a really good relationship with Eric, and I asked Denis to reach out, and they did most of the legwork for us.
Good. So Garrett, you didn't have to do much. That seems like a good job.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hop on a lot of calls for the more technical side of things. You know, a lot of the geo questions are just trying to explain, you know, our overreaching theory for this project.
Good. Well, here's why I'm bringing that up, or why I'm asking. Like, who did you have to hurt to get Eric's money? I'm just wondering, how does a billionaire buy mining? And we've tried getting Eric on, and potentially we'll get him on an interview eventually. What I'm thinking here specifically is, what questions is he asking? He comes in, is he asking mostly? I mean, Garrett, is he asking questions more of you? Like, is he asking technical questions? Does he have a guy with him? Jordan, is he asking about the corporate situation? What is he asking?
Yeah, so I think Eric is, as you know, a well-rounded investor. He's going to ask all the questions. We actually set up a call originally with the Earth Labs technical team, and Garrett walked them through the core, explained the discovery process, and then the message was, I'm sure, relayed back to Eric Sprott. If I think back to my old Gold Spot days, which is now Earth Labs, I remember Eric always saying he loved projects that had the standard 100 gram meters, right? Those high grade deposits where you could connect A to B and calculate the resource. And our project is obviously high grade with our hit, and I think ours works out to 550 gram tons. So I think to an investor like Eric, this high grade potential deposit is very appealing to him.
Why I'm asking that?
Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead, Antonio.
You can go. I actually wanted to go into the corporate situation, because why I'm asking that is that the question came up on CEOCA last week about the founders share situation. Like, it seems that a lot of the insider ownership that you guys have right now, it was acquired at valuations that are more than 90% lower than what the stock price is right now. So way lower than what Eric is coming in. So why I'm bringing that up is, like, how is he dealing with that situation where, like, you guys are in way lower, or I don't even know, is it one, like, who's got all those founder shares?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and it comes up a lot with new investors who don't know the story. So management currently owns about 55% of the company. That's including the founders and directors of the company. And I have to say, we all are escrowed for 3 years under the standard TSX escrow. That allows us to take the project to almost a completion or an actual deposit before we can even basically sell our shares. But going back to the original story, when we founded the company, we teamed up with Garrett and Brett. Garrett, who's on the call here, they staked the property from scratch. No one's ever really been on those properties. They thought they found this beautiful eye structure that looks similar to the Sirius resource Nova Bollinger that we were always referring to in the past. And when I founded the company, I didn't want to just option off a property and the geos go get lost. I wanted to really build a team around Rant Metals. And Garrett and myself got along really well, and Brett as well. So I wanted them to be part of the management, and in order to do that, you got to reward people with shares. So we all took a big stake in the company, and we even put up some of our own money to get things started. And we did our initial seed round at 15 cents. So I think we raised somewhere between 500 and 600,000 at 15 cents. And that gave us the funds to fly TDEM and EM across the whole property. And that's how we discovered the anomalies originally.
Okay, I want to move forward on that. I have a couple of follow-up questions, but I was actually just thinking about, Garrett, we're basically seeing your face for the first time on semi face-to-face, the first time on a podcast. Let's get maybe a little bit of a background. I can read on the website kind of your short bio, but there's basically just one main question that I ask when I meet new people who are running companies is like, why should I trust you with my money? Like, what have you done before that makes you trustworthy? And Luke's a shareholder. I'm not yet. If I wanted to become one, why should I trust you?
That's a great question because, we are pretty much nobodies in the industry, right? Both Brett and I teamed up in university, and I would just ask that people judge us on what we've done to date. We've really tried to structure the company where we are very much aligned with the shareholders. Like, yes, we do own a large portion of the shares, but I think that just makes us very much aligned with our shareholders, where we're not successful unless our shareholders are successful. So, I think that's one thing that's missing in a lot of companies is, they're just lifestyle companies, and that's not what we're about. So we've always told our investors that we want to take that money, put it into the ground, and go out and test new targets. Like, we don't want to go twin old drill holes or do anything of that sort. We really want to get out there and do true exploration. So as I said, I've worked for many of the major companies, like Newmont, Rio Tinto, things like that. But I've always seen myself as more of a prospector at heart. This has always been, what we've wanted to do, what I've wanted to do. So I just ask that people judge us on what we've done to date. And, we've really tried to stick by what our original plan was, which is, go out there, put money in the ground, and let the drill results speak for themselves. I think that's what's needed in the industry today.
One way.
Sorry, you mentioned a couple of companies, and they are mostly gold companies. So did you have more of a background in gold than in nickel, the original idea behind ramp metals?
It's kind of split. I worked originally, I've done shorter contracts for, like I said, for Newmont, for SSR here in Saskatchewan, up at the CB gold mine up there. That was actually one of the first contracts I've worked. But the last couple of years with Rio Tinto, I was actually working on a diamond project. So there was a diamond project just east of Prince Albert here in Saskatchewan, and that's where I was working for the past couple of years. So, my original roots where I started everything was in gold, but the 2 years prior to this, I did work in diamonds.
Did you how did you find this project? What was the point where what were you doing in your career at the time you found this project and you decided, I want to bring this forward?
Well, as I said, it's something we've always wanted to do since university. Since my last year of university, I've always wanted to do my own thing. I was just tired of companies going out there twinning a drill hole and claiming a discovery. So I'm a big investor myself, and I was just sick of it in the market. So we just said, let's try to do this ourselves. Brett is the more down to earth one. I'm the dreamer, I guess you could say. So, Brett always, tried to keep us employed through these jobs. He was always getting me a job at Rio or somewhere where we could, put the money in ourselves and keep ourselves afloat until we could team up with Jordan here and really get this off the ground.
So you're a geo and a dreamer? No, that's not possible. That never happens.
I don't like describing myself as a geo. I do have a BSc in geology, but as I said, I'm a prospector at heart. I want to get out there and really just go out and discover new properties.
Well, so I want to, Garrett, this goes for you, but Jordan, for you as well, is that I want to go back to that alignment. Like, why should I trust you? Then that's alignment, and that kind of fits well within what we're talking about here. Is those founder shares, like what you guys telling us here, and Garrett, with your background, is like you worked for this. I'm all for founder shares when you've earned them. You're taking the risk. You're an entrepreneur at that point. You should get compensated for that. You both are young guys. I hope you are, but I don't imagine you have limitless money. And so what I'm thinking is like, okay, skin in the game, like you have sweat equity, but when is the financial equity coming to? And that is within the framework of, does Eric Sprott want you to do that? Like, is he going to push you to participate in future financings? Are you going to increase actual at the market price buying? Talk to me about stuff like that.
Yeah, look, that's a great question that we always get up, and I can pass it to Garrett after this. But you probably saw our insider buying the last couple of weeks. I bought I think almost 150,000 shares when the stock pulled back a bit. I always want to show that I'm buying in the market to support the stock, like public shareholders are doing as well. Going back to the original story, we always had the dream of getting the funds, raising funds, and putting it directly in the ground. And we've always promised that, and that's what we delivered on. When we raised our seed round, that money went directly into geophysics. When we raised our RTO Go Public round, we were drilling basically on day one of trading. So far, like Garrett said, we're not a lifestyle company. None of us really got paid for months before the RTO. Like, we all did this on our own dime, and we've been rewarded with founder shares. Going back to your second question, we plan on sticking with this company until a discovery, or until we build a mine or get taken out, and that's the plan. We're here for the long run. And look, I know we're not supposed to talk about numbers, but I would love to see this turn into $1 billion company where we end up selling it to one of the majors, and that's the dream.
Are you sure you're not a geo, Jordan? Because you seem like a dreamer as well.
I'm a geotech engineer, but I also am a dreamer. I'm aligned with Garrett on that one.
What is again, I'm just going back to my initial question, which is what I'm trying to understand with everything here is like, what does Eric Sprott want, and what does he want you to do? And so with one other thing that I noticed is your board of directors, and I understand when you're starting a company, like you have to put some type of board of directors together. Oftentimes that's not going to be the perfect ultimate board of directors. Over time it may change. Does Eric want you to do that? And again, why I'm asking that, like, is because you seem close to all the people that I can see on your website and the board of directors. Like, you all kind of seem like a tight group, if you will. And so does Eric want to bring a change in that? Like, does he want an independent board of directors as you move forward and you become that larger, hopefully larger company?
Yeah, that wasn't discussed yet, but we do have a couple independents on our board, as well as our advisors. So I think I can't speak for Eric, but he probably got some comfort in our seasoned advisors like Mark Bennett, Richard Murphy, Scott McLean. All these guys have made discoveries in the past, whether it was nickel or gold. I think Mark found over 15 million ounces of gold in his career as well, and won prospecting award of the year for that. And yeah, I think we could bring on more people to the board in the future, but that hasn't been discussed at this point.
What about the financing? So you announced the 4.5 million financing. Eric Sprott is announced being the lead investor. Can you tell us what amount he's going to take, or is that still uncertain?
Yeah, I can't talk about the financing really while we're in the middle of it. That will probably be disclosed on closing. It's expected to close in less than 3 weeks. So we could shed more light on that in the future.
And are there other investors in the deal already, or is everything closed and done? I've heard some people who had interest, and I can imagine that there's a lot of interest. So did you already sort of close the book, or?
Yeah, so the financing is pretty much fully subscribed. We have a short list of orders that are beyond exceed the 4.5 million. So we have to just go through that and really make sure we have the proper shareholders in our deal that have supported us all along. So yeah, it's look, I wish I could get everyone in this deal, but in the end, it's really just a handful of people.
And do you still have room to upsize, or is there no room for that?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that right now, but you should hear more about that in the coming weeks.
How did you, I mean, 4.5 million, what will that bring you? What can you do for 4.5 million? Is that one season of drilling? And of course, it depends a little bit on how your next steps are going to be. Are you going to find more? Is it, I mean, I can imagine that you cannot exactly know at this stage because you were surprised by the discovery as well. But what is the budget for 1 year of work based on your current knowledge?
Garrett, did you want to step in on this and talk about the field program?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, obviously all the charity flow through stuff is going to have to go into the ground within a year, right? So that's, you know, a minimum of whatever that was, a couple $1 million at least. I'm thinking that, you know, the program will probably run around 3 million-ish. You know, we're just ballparking here, so you know, don't quote me on this exactly. But I'd like to see, you know, at least 5,000 meters of drilling within the next year. And as well as we're going to get out there beforehand and do like a big mapping program ahead of time, because we pretty much drilled these blind just off of airborne geophysics. There really hasn't been a lot of groundwork, some very minimal prospecting on the area. But what we really need to do now is get out there and do a good mapping program ahead of time, because the rock that this is hosted in isn't really going to show up on any of our geophysics for targeting. So mapping is going to be very crucial to make sure we get out there and you know, really try to track this stuff down and see if we can track those shear zones and everything where the gold is being hosted.
Is the rock exposed, or is there also a lot of overburden?
So at our Ranger site, there's quite a bit of exposure. You know, it's a lot of ridges. In between the ridges, you know, there's obviously some low spots, but there is a lot of exposure at Ranger. And that's actually the reason we stopped there when we went out and cut the pads in October, because we had went out to our original target, which was Rogue. And, you know, we cut the pad there, but everything was, turns out was under like 10 meters of overburden there. So, you know, there wasn't a lot for outcrop there. We took a few random soils and then we bumped over to the Ranger target because we had seen there's quite a bit more outcrop there. So I think, you know, with this mapping program that we hope to get to in late summer to early fall here, I really think that'll give us a much better picture of you know, what's going on there.
I'm wondering, Luke, if I may get into this. And again, I don't know the rocks here as intimately as I may like, but I'm going through the news release and seeing on the Ranger zone, Garrett, to what you just said, is that you're seeing quartz diorite crosscut with mafic dikes and thin granitic bands, which makes it seem like I know what I'm talking about. I don't. What I know, though, that I'm seeing is lithological variations, basically. And so I'm thinking, do you really understand the rocks well enough or ready to go and do like a you know, a multi-million-dollar exploration program? And if you can talk to me about that first, but also talk to me about what are the processes that, if you do understand a project, what do you think of the geological processes that could have created this lithological variation?
For sure. So as far as what we know about the rocks out there right now, it's not a ton. You know, like I said, we've done very little, you know, just a quick smash and grab prospecting trip for a couple hours that one day, and then the one drill hole into the project. So far, what we can say is that the gold that we did encounter at surface was in more of a mafic or ultramafic, you know, rocks, because that's what we were focused on when we first went out there, was just these mafic to ultramafics. So we were just smashing off samples of those. So, you know, to have those come back mineralized, as well as the quartz diorite, you know, I wonder what the relationship is there, because you're finding it in two different rock types so close together. For the mafic dikes, ultramafic dikes, and everything that are cross-cutting the quartz diorite, as of now, we haven't found anything that correlates that mineralization to the mineralization that we found up top. So all the mineralization that we found in the hole seems to be just hosted within this quartz diorite. It's very, very fine grained. You don't see it with the naked eye. You really have to get in there with the scope and look at things. And it's very, very subtle. There's not a lot of alteration. You know, we got into this quartz diorite starting around 140 meters, I believe was the contact, and we were in it for 170 meters to 314, where we end up calling the hole. So it was like that all the way down, and the only real differences that I can kind of pull out from these zones that graded versus those that didn't is that the zones that graded seem to have a more pronounced foliation, more alignment of minerals, you know, indicative of a higher strain zone. But right now it's just, it's going to be a lot of mapping. And then, you know, the only real way to track this thing down, I think, is just to go out and start doing step outs and punch more holes. Because that's the only way we're really going to track this thing down. As I said, our geophysics won't pull out that, you know, the diorite or quartz diorite itself. There's not enough sulfides or anything in there to make a conductive body. It's not magnetic. So for targeting using geophysics, it is going to be quite difficult. The only thing that we can hope at this stage is that, you know, maybe even though that the sulfides we intersected weren't, you know, the nickel sulfides we were looking for, there may be some spatial relationship between those conductive sulfides and, you know, the host intrusion. Maybe it's a shell around the host intrusion, something like that that will aid in targeting. But there's not going to be a direct targeting mechanism that we can pull out from our geophysics. So it's going to be punching holes.
What do you think that possible spatial relationship between the pyrrhotite-rich sulfides and the gold mineralization that you mentioned here? You must have a theory, or like, what do you think that relationship is coming from?
I'm not sure at this stage, you know, other than, you know, maybe it's just sulfides related to this intrusion. But it's very difficult to say. The only reason we're speculating right now that there may be some sort of spatial relationship between them is because that's what we were targeting for this program, right? We were out there looking for these nickel targets, these highly conductive magnetic, you know, targets. And so if we were punching those in both locations and both locations had gold mineralization, now albeit Rogue was much lower mineralization than what Ranger was, that's why I'm thinking there may be some sort of spatial relationship between the two. What that spatial relationship is, we're not sure at this stage, but it is one common denominator between the two areas, is that we did punch these, you know, pyrrhotite conductors at both areas, and there just happened to be gold mineralization in the area as well. So it's something we have to look at, but it's just like anything. Our theories are constantly evolving. You know, we go out there, test our theories, gather data, bring that back, and see if it jives. If it jives with what we think, well then awesome, we continue down that path. If not, we just have to start looking at things from a different angle. So it's pretty much just going out there and constantly adjusting our theory as we go.
In terms of certainty or probability as to what mineralization might be associated with, it does look like it is associated with these late stage granitic pegmatites, though. Is that, I mean, I suppose that's significant, which is why you wrote about it in the newsletter, or like, what do you see there?
Yeah, so that's again still a working theory at this stage. It's something that we noticed between the two zones, the two targets rather. So at Ranger, it was hosted within the quartz diorite, but just above the quartz diorite zone there was a granitic pegmatite, you know, for maybe a meter or so. That wasn't mineralized, but it, again, right now at this stage, we're just trying to find correlation between, you know, what looks similar between the two zones, why they both grade. And over at rogue target. Pretty much all the mineralization was associated with these granitic pegmatites. The only zones that graded over there were zones that had these granitic pegmatites in them. So we do think that there could be a correlation between that. Again, it's just going to take a lot of drilling and more in-depth analysis to figure that out. Like we're sending everything now for, whole rock geochem, all kinds of different analysis. We're going to get thin sections done, polished slabs, because everything is very, very subtle, especially in that quartz diorite. So we really want to see if we can pull out something geochemically or something that we can use as a targeting vector to really help us narrow down where we want to drill.
Is there any information that you get from this being a nickel area and you're finding gold? I mean, this is not the only place, I think, where nickel and gold happen at the same place, but is it telling you anything or is it not important?
Well, it definitely could be important. We do see that in lots of, like you said, lots of areas around the world where they will find, nickel close by to gold. So, speaking with Mark Bennett, one of our advisors, he brings up, Tropicana in Australia, the Tropicana deposit. Again, it was found in the Fraser Range, after Nova type thing where they were, Fraser Range suddenly became known for nickel. And then they found this weird Tropicana gold deposit in these gneisses in the same region. So it does happen. We have yet to find nickel on our property, even though I still think it's a great, we have great targets for it and a great regional theory for it. But at this stage, yeah, so far it's been only gold, and the only nickel that's been found has been, the old Rottenstone mine to this date, and Gochagger, but they're all, tens of kilometers away from where we're at right now.
I'm not certain if that's the case. Not super well familiar with the rocks here, but you for example, seem to have fine grained VG, so visible gold, within some of these higher strain zones within the foliation, I believe. Is that the same like what they used to see, or like what do you think of the implications of having that VG there?
Well, I think the implications are I mean, it's good for us. Anytime we can find VG, that's always good. As far as Tropicana goes, I haven't done a ton of reading on them yet. I'm not sure exactly what the mineralization looked like there, but I do know that it was very subtle there as well. It was just these, they had these big packages of gneiss, and then whether stuff got remobilized or what happened there, but they were just certain layers within these gneisses. But again, it was something kind of similar to us where, you just get a bunch of core that looks exactly the same, and then you just have these little zones that seem to grade. So a lot of reading is going to need to be done for us. Other comparisons I've heard for us have been, I knew somebody that worked at the CB gold mine, and they were saying that our core looks similar to their gap hanging wall. The gap hanging wall deposit here in Saskatchewan. And CB is the only other gold mine that we have in Saskatchewan here. So that's another avenue that we're going to have to explore. But it's very, very difficult at this stage, especially with the one drill hole that we have and it ending in that quartz diorite. Like, I'm not sure if the quartz diorite itself is the host, or maybe that's the footwall. And the main carrier of the mineralization we just didn't get to see on the other side of the quartz diorite. So we could be close to the contact there. We're just not sure. So it's going to take a lot more holes to figure out, what the adjoining stratigraphy and everything else looks like.
This the 7.5 meter of 74 grams. Your sampling interval is, I think, 1.5 meter at least. That's the including sections of 1.5 meter of 160 grams and 1.5 meter of 180 grams, 1.5 meter of 20 grams. So this is in most cases when you see this grade, there's typically 1 meter that grades everything, and the remaining 6, it's almost nothing. That's not the case here, but you did give the details for 4.5 meter. Do you think most of this is covered within that 4.5 meter? Is that what it is? The width that you currently found?
Yeah. So we don't really like to smear things out too far. I really like to keep the intervals tight and just kind of let them speak for themselves. We did hit mineralization, 0.3, 0.2 grams per ton and stuff outside of that zone, which you can see in our expanded table. In our most recent news release, we gave an expanded table with a 0.2 grams per ton cutoff. But yeah, everything is pretty much hosted within those intercepts. I can give you a quick breakdown. So our first intercept was, these are all 1.5 meters to make up the 7.5 meters. So the first intercept was our 164 grams per ton. And then the next 1.5 meters was almost a gram per ton, 0.866 grams per ton. And then we got into the 182 gram per ton, 19.9 grams is the next one. And then we get into the last one that's 0.988 grams per ton. So that is our 7.5 meter interval. And, like I said, we did get lower grade outside of there, but I just didn't want to, I don't like it when companies, spear stuff out further.
It's always very difficult for me I'm not a geologist, and even as a geologist, it's probably difficult. You see a news release like this and it's clearly company changing, at least in the junior mining world. Even though it's uncertain, and in my mind, it could still be maybe a nothing in the future, but it could also be the start of the best discovery in years. So that's one question. What do you think about that statement? And the second thing is there anything that you can already, I mean, you have one drill hole, and of course it's a third dimension. It's better than just having something on surface. You really found something completely by surprise while looking for nickel. But is there anything that you can already sort of, I mean, could this be, is the best case scenario a very high grade but sort of smallish mine, or could this even be a very big, large scale mine? Or is that really a question you cannot answer because you need to drill a number of holes before you can start to paint a picture of a potential, where is this going?
Yeah, so to your first question, it's, if I just look at this statistically, if I look at it statistically, what are the odds that the first blind hole into a deposit that you discover by accident is going to be your best hole? That's a possibility for sure. But I do think it's highly unlikely. Normally in these situations, when you're finding a deposit or delineating a deposit, you really have to figure out what's going on in the system before you can really dial in those, those really nice high grade intercepts and stuff like that. So for us to, dummy that straight off the hop, I think it just speaks to the potential. Like you said, it's going to take a lot more holes to figure out. We can't comment on the size or, average grade, anything like that at this stage because it's only one hole. But I will, caution people that nobody should expect that we're going to be constantly pulling 73 grams per ton. There's no mine in the world, that has an average grade of 73 grams per ton. I fully expect us to have, higher grade shoots and then lower grade outside of that, and multiple zones because we did hit multiple zones in this one hole. But I do think it's going to be a mix of, higher grade and lower grade stuff. But to have these higher grade zones in the first hole, the first discovery hole, I think, and over significant intercepts, I think it really speaks to the potential of the region for sure.
All right. Well, that's good. Yeah, it is in a way difficult for investors because normally, or not normally, in some cases you find a company that makes a discovery and is still drilling, so you can immediately follow up, and within a number of weeks you get, maybe sometimes a month, you get a follow-up. In this case, there's a drill hole, this announcement, there's a financing, there's a couple of months of maybe, well, not nothing, but maybe to investors, not much, an announcement of a new sampling program. And then, so that's more like from a stock point of view, it's difficult to keep the market excited for like half a year, but that's probably what it is, right? It's your drilling starts again in September, October-ish, and assays towards the end of the year, I guess.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're going to try to get out there as soon as possible. Our last permits did expire at the end of our last drill program. So, we put in for new permits and we're going through the permitting and consultation process here. So there is going to be, with this taking us by surprise so much, we didn't have a follow-up drill program planned right away or anything like that. So, you know, there is going to be a bit of lag time between us getting out there and drilling again, but it's just one of these things that we have to do. We really have to make sure that we're doing, you know, the proper consultation with the communities and land users in the area, and going through the proper permitting process. In the future, I don't expect that to be an issue, because, you know, we could just say, you know, 6 months before the permit expires, just start on the follow-up permits and everything like that. This was just kind of a very unique situation where we were completely caught off guard. Really didn't expect to be going out there and doing a big follow-up drill program right away. So there is just going to be a bit of a lag time now between that. But we're going to get out there as soon as possible. Like, as soon as we have those permits in hand, we'll be heading back out.
I think a lot of people don't think about it, especially people like me who only really do desktop research. We don't think a lot about the logistical side of things, like technical logistical side of preparing to move to a drill program is a lot. You know, I spoke to a group of geos that we had dinner with, and they were telling me like they had to make a choice on what kind of toilets are they going to place in a camp, and when is that going to be picked up? What are they going to do with it? And like small stuff like that you never think about. What exactly do you have to do before you can you know start deploying the drill?
So we're quite lucky where we are. You know, it's quite a bit of heli time, but we don't, it's not like we have a camp or anything out at site. All of our stuff has so far right now has been based out of Missinippi, which is, you know, a resort town in northern Saskatchewan. It has everything there, you know, cabins, kitchens, airstrip, everything that we would need. So everything is drivable up to that point, which is nice. You know, this last program was a lot, as you said, a lot of logistics, because we weren't paying people. It was literally just Brett and myself. You know, Brett was doing runs almost every day back to Prince Albert, back to La Ronge to pick stuff up and bring it back up to site. But you know, our staging area was right at the Missinippi airstrip. So it was really good to have everything very accessible, and then we would just, you know, ferry the crews out, you know, back and forth. So a camp is something I think we'll definitely look at in the future. But it's a lot more logistics, a lot more permitting and everything like that. So I think for this, you know, the upcoming program would still be based out of Missinippi. And then once we can show that this thing has some, you know, some size and some extent to it, then we can really look at, you know, building a camp out there in the future.
And in terms of well, I don't know, line cutters or something else that you have to deploy just so you can be prepared, what else needs to happen? I mean, outside of whatever it might be, like roads or trails or.
Yeah, so we don't, there's no real, you know, roads or trails or anything out there. It is just, you know, we go and plunk the crews down. We do get our local line cutters and everything. We're from the Grandmother's Bay community, which is right across the bay from us. And so is our camp hand and core cutter. So we try to source everything local. We've really been working with our local contractors and the business arm of the local Indian band. So we can do everything through them, and then all the profits get returned to the community. So it's one thing that, you know, we're really happy about, is that we try to use local communities and local companies as much as possible here. So sourcing all our labor and everything isn't that difficult for us. We just have to reach out to the communities, and they really supply everybody that we need.
Right. Okay. I don't think I have too many other questions. Basically, the last thing that I'm wondering about, and this is within my kind of fixed questions that I like asking companies, like the one that I ask you, like, why should I trust you with my money? It's basically, you have a couple of answered questions here. A lot of these questions, you have an idea as to how you want to go about answering them. You think you can answer them this year. You don't know if it's going to be a positive or a negative answer to your unanswered question. But what if it's positive? Let's assume it is. Best case scenario, what does that look like? And then more specifically, what does that do to the valuation of the company? Like, what will Ramp Metals be worth in the best case scenario after spending this couple of $1 million here?
Yeah, that's always a very tricky question when you talk valuations, because there's a lot of outside factors like market conditions and geopolitical conditions. Look, there's a U.S. election coming up as well. But if we just talk about the rocks and the drill program, I like looking at previous examples. So one chart I love following is Great Bear. They're a couple provinces over, but similar to us, they were worth about 50 cents or $30 million valuation. They got their Rob McEwen investment. They went and put the money into the ground, did a drill program, and the more they drilled, the more the valuation ran up. And they were eventually taken out by Kinross after a couple years. So we plan on following a similar model, not exact. Everything's always different, but that is kind of the end goal. And when you call Garrett and myself dreamers, that's what we look forward to.
Yeah, a couple of months ago, nobody really knew you, I think. I met you in Vancouver, and we had a really brief chat about your nickel plans. But I really think that until a couple of weeks ago, people didn't really know you. Are you going to do any conferences to tell people about, about the company and about this discovery, or are you staying? The money is in. Are you staying inside, and are you going to do the work only?
Yeah, look, the majority of the money is going right into the ground. I will travel around and attend conferences as an attendee and try to network as much as possible. I love doing that. I love meeting new people. I want to get the story out there. So I will try as much as possible if it doesn't interfere with our drill and summer program. But then once, I think we'll be more active too once this next drill program's over and things really develop.
I
All right.
think that's going to have to be it. That's a good note to end the conversation on. What are we forgetting to ask you, though, gentlemen? What is well, we've tried being fairly annoying in this conversation with our questions, but what's another annoying? I mean, you talk to a lot of people. What's another annoying question that people are asking you don't like being asked?
Ooh, I would say nothing's really annoying. I really just appreciate shareholders reaching out. Our emails and numbers are always open. So if you do want to reach out and learn more about the company, don't feel like you're annoying. Just pick up the phone or write an email. I'll get back to you eventually. Might not be on the same day because, as you imagine, we're really busy right now. But I do try to return all phone calls and emails when